Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Selling Greenville, your favorite real estate podcast here in Greenville, South Carolina. I'm your host, as always, Stan McCune, realtor right here in lovely Greenville, South Carolina. You can find all of my contact information in the show notes if you need to reach out to me for any of your real estate needs. And just a reminder, as always, you can always like, rate, review, subscribe to the show in order to try to get it out to as many people as possible. So please go ahead and do that. I would really appreciate if you guys could support the show in that way. And the other way you can support the show is by supporting our sponsor, Piper Insurance Group. They will help you with all your home, auto, and umbrella insurance needs, which is more important than ever, as a lot of people are going to be contacting their insurance agent. Having an insurance agent who is on the ball will really help you, and I can promise you you'll get that with Piper Insurance. They're an independent agency, which means that they can quote with multiple different carriers to get the best rate, licensed in South Carolina, North Carolina, and Georgia. And they can help you out with fix and flips, rentals, ground up new construction, commercial, et cetera, et cetera. So please reach out to Piper Insurance Group for a free quote today. I would appreciate it. They would appreciate it. And I'm sure that it will be a great fit for you guys. Their contact information is in the show notes. So we had a hurricane come into Greenville. This really doesn't happen. It was I mean, we have storms coming to Greenville, obviously. It's not that we never have hurricanes that turn into tropical storms and end up hitting us. It's pretty rare that they start in the Gulf and come up with any sort of velocity and hit us. But yeah, wake me up when September ends. Very much is my feeling right now. I'm recording this on September 30th. I am ready to turn the page on the month of September, as many people are. And so let me just assume for a second that you don't know. I think most of my listeners will know, but just in case you don't, Hurricane Helene did end up coming into after it, wreaked havoc on Florida and Georgia. It ended up coming into South Carolina and North Carolina, as I silence my phone. By the way, I'm getting to this, but I'm recording in a different location. I'll explain that in a second. Came into South Carolina and North Carolina, and it was really a 1 in 100+ year weather event. I mean, what we had, the amount of rain, the amount of wind, it was just unbelievable. Greenville had wind gusts up to 68 miles per hour. Rain was around 12 inches in a very short period of time, probably like 48-ish hours. And so catastrophic flooding. Western North Carolina had it even worse than us. So really, I feel like it's apropos for me to discuss this because, quite frankly, the national media isn't covering it. And I know a lot of my listeners are listeners from out of town, out of state. You guys might be interested in hearing what is happening. Well, the reason why I'm not recording with my normal background is I'm actually recording this from my actual office because my actual office has power and internet, which my current home office and studio does not have. I have been almost a week now. Well, not quite a week, half a week without power. It's felt like an eternity. You go from once you hit day 2 of no power, it feels like it's just never going to end. And I don't want to play, the pity party game with myself because a lot of people had it way worse than we did, which I'll get into in a second. But long story short, my office has power. My office, however, is very echoey and loud. And so there might be some background noise. I apologize for that. This is the best I can do to keep producing good content for you guys, even when storms wreck the infrastructure of the area that I'm trying to record from. So long story short, here's kind of what happened for those that are outside the area. Hurricane Helene, we knew that it was coming up from the Gulf. We knew it was going to impact South Carolina, North Carolina. But what we didn't know was that the models all predicted that it was going to veer, the worst of the storm was going to veer west of us. And in fact, the worst of the storm went right over us and went right over Asheville, North Carolina, and a lot of small mountain towns in North Carolina. And it just caused an unbelievable amount of flooding and an unbelievable amount of wind damage. Um, in Greenville specifically, the flooding wasn't as bad as, if you're seeing images of insane flooding, for the most part, that's not in Greenville. Now, the area around Unity Park, which Unity Park was built on a swamp, those are some of the most extreme images that I've seen. But Unity Park was designed to flood and to then have floodwaters recede. So they built a park on a swamp, knowing that it was going to flood, and they did a good job with it to design it so that it can flood and then unflood. Now the question is it designed to hold 5 feet of water, which was maybe not quite 5, maybe closer to 4 feet of water? There was enough water in the park that you could easily ride a boat through there if you wanted to. I don't know if it's quite designed to hold that much water, but I hope that it was. And I know that the engineers that worked on the Unity Park did a really fantastic job with it. So hopefully that'll be okay. But for the most part, people with basement homes did have flooding. I have a basement home. I had the slightest bit of water come into my basement. Essentially, I have a creek on my property, and my garage faces the creek. My garage runs the entire width of my house. So water came into my garage and then seeped a little bit into my laundry room, bathroom, and guest bedroom. But it was nothing. It was nothing I need to make an insurance claim about or anything like that. It was kind of a nothing event from that standpoint. But others I know had severe flooding in their home. Again, not flooding where like you're like getting up on top of your roof and waiting for a helicopter to save you, but flooding where, a tremendous amount of water damage to their home. So these sorts of things, they do happen. They have happened. But the biggest thing that we're seeing is the wind damage. I mean, Greenville is not designed to handle 65-mile-per-hour winds. I mean, I don't know too many cities that are designed to handle that, but I mean, we just never have that. So there are trees uprooted everywhere. Massive trees. Actually, the thicker trees were the ones that got caught up the most. On my property, I have a lot of thinner trees, and only one of them fell, and that was a tree that already was completely eaten up by termites. And so the wind damage was isolated to specific pockets of town primarily, in terms of like those trees just falling everywhere. Specifically the areas that had those really thick, mature trees. I've seen them down all over town. Taylor's got hit really hard. The west side of Greenville got hit really hard, which is really sad because, I went through some of the more impoverished areas of Greenville, and that was unfortunately some of the worst hit parts of town. And just, you drive anywhere, you can't avoid it. There is chaos everywhere in Greenville from this wind damage. Power outages, like I said, Duke Energy is sending us messages that says power won't be on until Friday. That being said, I own rental properties, and one of my rental properties, they sent me a text message this morning that said power would come back on Friday, which was the exact same message they sent me about my own home. And then later, they sent me a message, power has been restored, again, to my rental property, not to my main house. So that is what we're experiencing right now. We're seeing some things that I've never seen before. We've got all these at the Haywood Mall, all these semis, massive trucks that are essentially mobile bedrooms, little mobile apartments for first responders coming in. We've got first responders coming in from California, I read. We've got electricians coming down here from Canada. We do not have the manpower for something like this. It's it's been declared a national emergency by the president, and so things are the response seemed slow at the beginning because again, when you're without power and you don't know what's happening, and there's trees down everywhere, it's like, when are we going to start seeing some stuff? Well, soon enough, we started to hear the chainsaws, hear the generators crank up, and all of that, and things are starting to move. I started to see some power equipment near my house And so I am hoping against hope that I'll get power soon. But if not, that's okay. It's been a real lifesaver that my office has had power and internet, at least from the standpoint of my personal business. That's been extremely helpful. Now, a lot of people are asking how we're doing. My family, we're doing fine. Like I said, we've been out of power, but that's not the worst thing in the world, right? We've been able to manage. We've got I've got gas grills and things like that that we can warm things up on. My refrigerator and freezer are like the best insulated refrigerator freezer ever. Nothing has gone bad in them. Of course, we've been restocking with ice, which is hard to find. Probably the most stressful thing out of all of this was because we were all blindsided by this, right? Nobody could have predicted this would happen. The only thing comparable to it was over 100 years ago, Asheville had a storm like this. And so that's how, it's when we say it's a 1 in 100 year event, like literally it was a 1 in 100 year event. But I was foolish, I'll be honest. I had the day before the storm made landfall, I had a long day of driving and brought my gas tank down pretty low, and did not get gas. And needless to say, that was not a good choice. When I went out after the storm and after things kind of settled, priority number one was get gas. Well, needless to say, that's priority number one for like a bunch of people. And so I was going around to gas stations, and I was actually experiencing people in line at gas stations that didn't have power, and so they couldn't pump gas, couldn't do anything. I guess people were just sitting there hoping that power would get restored to the gas station. Obviously, that didn't happen. And then I also saw instances of people in line, in some cases, very long lines. Like we're talking about maybe multi-hour lines at gas stations that did not have gas. Like they even had signs that said, "We don't have gas." But I guess they were just waiting to be refilled on gasoline. I was in a desperate situation. I had 40 miles till empty when I left my house. And, it was hard to find places that even had power at that point. Well, I finally got in line with 18 miles till empty at a gas station that had gas, had power. I could tell it had gas. It's funny. I became an expert at being able to identify whether it had gas or not, right? If you see people actually pumping, and actually, at their pump, at their gas cap, then you had an idea, okay, they're actually refilling their vehicles. Whereas if they were at stations that didn't have gas, people would just be hanging out, talking, have their tailgate down, just chilling, waiting, I guess, hoping against hope that the gas would get refilled while they were there. So it was crazy. I finally, after waiting for 45 minutes, finally pulled up to the pump on empty and was able to get a full refill. There was no price gouging, although I saw some people say that they thought that price gouging should have happened in order to prevent people from going too crazy with their gasoline. That didn't happen. Gas here is still hovering around $3. It was cheaper than that prior to this event. It was starting to get into the mid twos, but it's at $3, so it's still quite cheap, relatively speaking. And so, that was my closest call, and probably the scariest part of this whole thing for me. A lot of businesses are opening, but without the ability to process payments, and so cash has become a thing again. And of course, ATMs are all down as well. So you either have cash or you don't. It's interesting. Okay, even my dog, who is a 3-year-old mini golden doodle, unbelievable amount of energy, never goes to bed before we do. She fancies herself a guard dog and needs to wait until we all go to bed before she does. One night, with basically our house lit by candlelight, she was like conked out at 9:30 p.m. I have never seen her since she was a very, very tiny puppy, conked out at 9:30 p.m. So just very interesting times. I'm good with not having interesting times anymore, but nonetheless, interesting times are constantly upon us. There's another storm brewing in the Gulf, apparently. But the from what I've heard today, it seems like maybe it seems like it's going to be a weaker storm. Perhaps it won't develop into a cyclone. Perhaps it'll veer into Mexico or somewhere else. So that's what we're hoping, because we really don't need we definitely don't need more wind, but we really don't need rain, particularly in North Carolina. And I do want to bring attention to them for a second, because I think I think that that's like I said, the national media, I'm pretty unimpressed with how they're handling this thing. And so I want to go ahead, if you're on YouTube, or if you want to log in on YouTube and take a look at this. And here's I'm showing a video of Chimney Rock. The downtown stretch of Chimney Rock was really crushed, like just absolutely crushed, just debris everywhere, local businesses devastated. Very, very difficult things to see. Here's another video of the Chimney Rock area. Like it's hard to comprehend. Again, these things do not happen in Western North Carolina. It's so unusual. You can see boats just out in debris fields. It's just really devastating. People, I'm hearing stories of people dying on tops of their roofs, waiting to be rescued by air assistance or whatever the case may be. And unfortunately, there's only so much that can be done right now, only so many resources that are out there. And so it's just it's a devastating event. Even though I'm not personally in Western North Carolina, I don't do business up there. I do a lot of hiking up there. I like to hike. I love that little town of Chimney Rock. I love Asheville. I love, just all of those little mountain towns up there. Great hiking spots, great restaurants, great breweries, good places to spend a weekend or whatever. And so it does touch me and impact me personally to see this sort of devastation up there as well. And so, if you have a moment to send prayers or good vibes to Greenville, to Western North Carolina, please do so. I've heard the Greenwood and Abbeville, South Carolina also got hit pretty hard. No, it's just, there's just a lot that happened. Now, thankfully, what happened in Asheville was they've got the French Broad River, which is a giant river that goes straight through their city. And it reached a level that it had never reached before in modern history. And it crested a over 100-year record. And there are just people that are completely stranded, without food, without water, without power. I have some clients up there looking to buy in Greenville. I've communicated with some of them. They seem okay, but not everyone out there is okay. So hopefully emergency responders will be able to get to these people that are stranded and be able to bring them to safety. So what does this mean? Okay. And what else do I want to say about this? Well, I just want to say this right away. Okay. Because this is, at the end of the day, I'm not a news podcast. I'm a real estate podcast. Sometimes current events become a big part of what we talk about on here. But this is a real estate podcast. And so beyond what I've talked about, just in terms of the human element of this, I don't want to completely get away from what you guys are listening here for. And so I just want to start by saying this. For those thinking about moving to Greenville, I can assure you this is a rare event. I've already mentioned the 100-year storm thing multiple times. I personally have lived here 20 years, and never in my life have I ever lost electricity for more than a day. I mean, it takes a tremendously rare confluence of events for a storm like this to hit with such force like Helene did. Super duper rare, because usually these storms, they get so much weaker as they go over the land that by the time they get to Greenville, I mean, think about how much land they have to cross over from the Gulf. Even if they're coming in from the Atlantic, it's really, really rare that we get tropical storm force winds. And so this was just a super unusual event that we've really just never happened. Would never have happened. It happened close a little more than 100 years ago. We can anticipate it'll probably happen once every 100 or so years. But it's not something, I mean, every place in the U.S. has weird 100-year storm events. And so you can't base anything off of that. If you're thinking about Greenville, please don't let the storm influence your decision one way or another. That is me as a realtor talking, but that's me as a common sense person talking. You should not factor this in. Factor it in from the standpoint of maybe avoiding floodplain areas, which I always tell my clients to do. But beyond that, I would not draw any major conclusions from the storm event. Another, consideration or another thing, that I think indicates how rare of a storm event it was. My mom, who moved down here recently, who used to live in New Jersey, she lived in New Jersey at the time that Sandy hit the New York metro area. And she has multiple times mentioned how similar this storm feels to her to what Sandy felt like. And of course, Sandy was one of those events that was once in a lifetime. And nobody thinks, wow, New York gets crazy hurricanes, ever since the Sandy event happened. And I think the same is true here. Nobody should be drawing any odd conclusions about, the weather patterns around here. This was just a strange turn of events that nobody could control. And here we are, just doing the best with the hand that we've been dealt. Now, more specifically for real estate, how is this impacting real estate, my business, etc.? I'll start with what I've been doing. What I've been doing is, first things first, I went out to my active listings. I wanted to see, well, I got a phone call early morning that told me that one of my listings had a tree fall on it. So it was like, okay, that's a priority. And then there was another one that's supposed to be closing, that was supposed to close last week, that is now supposed to close this week. That was also obviously a priority, along with others. I also have rental properties as well. And so really, first things first, I just wanted to see what all these properties, what this situation was with them. And so the first priority was my listings. And my assumption was with my rentals that I would hear from the tenants and ultimately from my property manager if there were issues that they were having, which I did from my Airbnb. My Airbnb property was angry about the weather, and I'm sorry, that's not something I can control. So find another Airbnb that doesn't have weather issues. Airbnb people are crazy. But I went around. It was very difficult to get around particularly the first day after the storm. But I went around town. I looked at my listings. One of them was really, really difficult to get to. I don't even know how I got to it because it was on the west side of Greenville. Like I said, the side of town that got hit harder than others. But I found a way to get there. And sure enough, a tree had fallen on the front porch. So I immediately called the seller, and I'm letting the seller know, hey, here's what happened. Here's what I recommend doing. Then my next call is to the buyer's agent. Hey, here's what happened. Here's what we're doing. We can keep this closing together. I've dealt with this multiple times with insurance claims in the middle of a transaction. We can work this together. And so far, so good. Everything is working okay with that. I'm coordinating debris removal and whatnot at my other listings, which did not have property damage, but did have debris damage. And that's something I'm just doing for my clients. I'm just handling these things because coincidentally, right now, all of my listings are vacant properties. And so it's not your standard situation where you've got owner occupants that are handling it themselves. I'm doing the work for my clients right now, and I'm fine to do that because I get paid to do this. It's like I don't get paid to not work. And I want to make sure that they have the best service possible, and I want to get their home sold. And so that's how I started. And now it's getting all the plans in place and trying to figure out all the timelines. Today, Friday I was supposed to have a closing. That got moved to today. Well, guess what? Then today it got moved for the dumbest reason possible. And that is that the homeowner's insurance could not bind the policy because the insurance carrier didn't have electricity. So you can't make this stuff up. So closing got delayed till tomorrow, and hopefully that will end up happening. We did do the final walkthrough. Of course, there's a lot of projects. I've got a house that I'm flipping. I've got other projects going on. We couldn't get more work done at those because of electricity related problems. My Airbnb, they couldn't clean because of lack of electricity. It's just crazy. And so these are the sorts of things. I mean, I'm estimating probably, and not to mention having to commute to work, having to go spend a lot more time in the office than I normally do to just charge things, right? We've got power banks and whatnot, but we were ill prepared for this event. I'm going to be honest. I'll probably be getting a generator here in the future because I can see why people have them. It's something that it will, come in handy if something like this ever happens again. And I like to be someone who is prepared. And so I will be prepared in the future, even though I think generators are probably going to take a while to become available again. But that's a little version of what I've been doing. All of this, I'm probably adding about 4 hours to my workday per day, to be completely honest. Even though, I mean, on the flip side, however, real estate kind of shut down for a few days, right? Nobody was doing anything. I mean, all the schools were pretty much closed today, on Monday. A lot of businesses are still closed. It's going to take a few days for things to open back up because you've got not just the power outages, but also all the workers, all the students and whatnot that are maybe unable to even get to where they need to be, or maybe they have power outages and it's a huge thing for them. And so there's just a lot of ripple effects from this storm event. Now, what about the market as a whole, beyond just my business? I've already referenced to me having a closing delayed, and no doubt I will have multiple closings delayed as a result of this. One that's a month from now, that I'm very confident will be delayed as a result of this. And this is what's going to happen. We're going to have tons and tons of closings delayed, some by multiple weeks. I've already heard some that are getting delayed by 2 weeks or more. And so that is just the reality of the situation. Listings all over the place have damage, right? Obviously, homes everywhere are suffering damage from this, and the listings are no exception. And so, this is why the first thing I did, basically was to go out and look at my listings, was because I wanted to make sure, if there was damage, we need to get out in front of it ASAP. I'm not going to pat myself on the back too much, but I know for a fact that a lot of agents aren't doing that. So there we go. A weak pat, a small pat on the back for myself. A lot of renters are going to be displaced. Like, let's just be honest. When I was on the west side of Greenville and I said that was some of the worst damage that I saw, that's a heavy rental area. I saw tons of cars crushed. Really, really sad. And what does this mean for the vacant rental properties that have property damage? I mean, renters are going to have to find new places to move to. Now there's going to be damaged vacant rental properties not bringing in income to their landlords and also requiring repairs. Well, a lot of these landlords are super duper poor. Like, let's just be honest. I've seen them. People have this perception of landlords as being super duper wealthy. That is not your typical landlord in the Greenville market. A lot of them, are kind of live off the land types, if that makes any sense. And they own some real estate that they bought years and years ago for really cheap. and they haven't updated it like they should have, and they're getting below market rent. And when something like this happens, usually there's nothing they can do about it. And so I suspect these renters, these landlords and landladies are going to start trying to sell off these properties. So there's going to be some opportunities for investors. I'm not sure if they'll hit the market or not, but there will for sure be opportunities. As well, I've already alluded to this, but obviously there are going to be some listings that buyers are going to want to look at that they're going to have a hard time looking at. They're going to have a hard time getting there. Because there are just so many down trees, so many down power lines. Some areas, I mean, it's so frustrating trying to get one place and then the main road that you need to get to, it's blocked off. And it's like there's no indication that it's blocked off. And, then you have to turn around. Now it adds 20 minutes to your trip. I mean, it's just insane, some of this stuff. Inspections. Can't really be done in many cases. I already mentioned that property that had the tree fall on it. That's one of my listings. The buyer's agent was like, well, maybe we'll go ahead and have inspections done and then come back and inspect the repairs. And I was just like, you don't want to do that. You don't waste your time. Just wait until it's all done. We'll give you extra time for your due diligence. Let's make this work for everyone in the best way possible. And so I think that's going to be an issue. We're going to see a backlog of inspections happening. And what I'm curious about is, will these next, few weeks, will we just lose business altogether for the year? Or will there be kind of a backlog of real estate business that happens as people that were, to give an example, I was going to list a house this past weekend, but after the storm, it was like, well, obviously, we're not listing a house during a time when nobody's going to be looking at houses, so we'll wait at least a week. How many other people are in that boat? How many others are waiting to list their homes now? Or how many buyers are waiting to buy now that, are going to put their search on hold for a couple of weeks, kind of get their life in order, and then come back into the market in a couple of weeks, versus how many are just going to drop out? Maybe they were... probably not too many listings are going to drop out, but if there's a lot of damage to it, it might take a while for the house to get repaired. And then by that point, we might be in November, holiday season. So maybe those people just be like, hey, I'm just going to wait until the spring. Who knows? I'm really unsure if we're going to simply see a worse year of real estate as a result of this, or if we're going to see something comparable to COVID, which was that when we had the shutdown for a few weeks, then when everyone came back into the market and started buying and selling again, they essentially made up for that lost time. It ended up being a very, very crazy next few months. I could see it going in either direction. Of course, this is the slower time of year, right? Where by the time you're listening to this, it'll already be in October. This is when things really start to slow down. So I don't know what all of that means for Greenville real estate. It'll be interesting to track and follow. But that's what we'll be doing, and I'll keep you guys in the loop on all that's going on and all the happenings. Let me know if you have any specific questions. A lot of you guys have been reaching out to make sure I'm okay, and I really appreciate that. We're okay. Others aren't, and so thank you for those messages. Feel free to hit me up with any more if you do have any. But that's all for today's episode. That has been sponsored by Piper Insurance Group. Please reach out to them for your homeowner's insurance quote in the show notes. Also, my contact information in the show notes if you need a realtor for any reason in the Greenville area. Please like, rate, review, subscribe to this show, and we will talk again next time.